Welcome to Ecologic for the month of November. I'm Roger Peak, sitting in again for Harold. My sidekick from last month, my co-host, Cash Schrieffer, is not with us tonight. He gave me such a hard time last month that I had to let him go. Just kidding, he's out of town. Again, this show is dedicated to Harold, now at Pelican Point Rehab in Maurice. Harold, we wish you all the best in your recovery. Keep up the good work. After a short intro, I would like to take our first call from Robert Andrews, who was cut short last month, who has a wealth of Harold stories, some which I've heard were mostly true. But first, let's recap what we learned last month. First thing we learned was that on Harold and Sarah's first date, that Sarah was able to witness the sunrise for the very first time. Also, when Harold and his daughter Catherine were out on the water and the boat steering broke down, the Harold was able to fashion an entire motorboat power steering unit from bamboo, like MacGyver. So, moving on. We also had some great stories from celebrities and friends, including Peter Heller, the author of the Outside article from years ago, and from General Honore. And so now, Robert, this is your cue. You can call in and let's hear your Harold story.
What's your favorite Harold story, Roger? Oh, I know yours. We're going to save that one, huh?
So until Robert calls in, I guess I got to... Where's my timer?
Oh, right here.
Okay, Robert, you missed your cue. So the story, one of my favorite Harold stories is he told me a long time ago that he was in a boat, like we used to call them cabin cruisers, and I forget which body of water. And he was in college, and he was driving the boat, and the only other occupant was the owner of the boat, and they were driving across some body of water and headed straight for a thunderstorm. And Harold was concerned that he asked the owner, he said, there's a thunderstorm straight ahead, maybe we should go around it or just wait. And the guy said, nope, proceed. Go on, this is not one of your little bateaus, Harold. We can go through it. So they head into the thunderstorm. Next thing you know, they get struck by lightning. The boat gets struck by lightning. Harold gets knocked out. When he comes to, there's a fire in the what you call it, the steering room. And fire and smoke everywhere. And the owner of the boat is inside the cabin, likely passed out, and Harold couldn't get to him because of the fire and the smoke caused by the lightning. So as Harold tells me, he turns the boat right angles to the wind and the rain, so therefore the rain and the wind dampened the fire and the smoke so Harold could get down into the cabin to pull out the unconscious friend and thereby saving his life. So that's when I began to think of Harold as being akin to Batman. So, okay, Robert, now is your chance. Okay. Robert misses his cue, so unless you want to hear me tell more stories, somebody call in. We are live, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I want to shout out to my helper, Jacob White, AOC expert in all things, who is sitting in for Dave Begno tonight and helping me get this show rolling. So, okay, is the phone working? Oh, you got a story?
me see if it works, and if you can insert.
Oh, wait, here we go. All right, you're on the air. Is that you, Jacob?
Hey, this is me, and I won't take up too much time so that I don't step on the toes of your next guest caller. But yeah, I first met Harold back at the old building of AOC, and was just helping them get set up. And he would always have a couple of scouts who, and this was true until about a year ago. He would always have a scout or two who he worked with the Boy Scouts, who would help him set up, and they were basically learning their production by doing it live and learning a little bit about TV and about how to get a show from concept to on the air. And so I met a number of these gentlemen over the years, but since I've grown up, or rather grown older, and a lot of them have grown up, I see them around from time to time. And most recently, I saw one of them working over at one of the collectible comic and card shops in town, just kind of being the leader for all these kids coming in to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Digimon or Pokemon. I can't remember which night it was. But, the thing, it's not really a story as much as it is that Harold, as just a leader who could step back and let people find their skills and, find their ability, really inculcated this in so many youths. And to see, another one of these kids who themselves is showing this leadership and this ability to just let people have fun and learn. It's been a joy knowing him, and we wish him the best, and I can't wait to see him again.
That's great, Jacob. Thank you so much. Harold is well known as a great mentor. Okay, we've got a lot of calls, so I'm going to catch the next one. Thanks,
Okay,
Jacob.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, this is Harold Scheffler Jr.
All right. Hi, Harold. Thanks for
How
calling.
you doing? I got another lightning story.
Oh, wow.
This was back when I think I was about 10 or 11 years old, and we had caught a lot of trout out of Oyster Bayou, and we were on our way back up the Atchafalaya River, and a huge squall hit in the river, making huge waves and a lot of wind, and there was lightning everywhere. My Uncle Fritz was following us with his two sons, and lightning was popping everywhere, and lightning hit the front deck of the boat.
Wow.
It scared Dad and I half to death, and we actually touched the boat to see if it was hot. My uncle and my two cousins thought we were dead, but we kept on going. Everything was fine. And that's the second time that Dad got struck by lightning and survived. I have another story if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Another time we were headed out to go fish in the same place, and going down the Atchafalaya, there was usually a lot of work boats, tugboats, and crew boats to pass, and we were passing a great big old crew boat, and the wave was huge, and we dove into it, and in the process of diving into it, the steering broke, and the boat turned sideways, and water went everywhere, but we were okay, but the steering was broken. And I was wondering what the heck my dad would do, and he scratched his head for a second and went to the back and got a bunch of rope out. The boat we were in was a 21-foot aluminum boat with twin engines. He tied the engine straight, and we got back in by using the power of the motors to turn the boat.
Yeah, that's incredible. That is a great story. Another MacGyver story. Are we looking for MacGyver stories and Batman stories, or
Yes,
anything?
sir. Definitely. My dad would fix about anything. He never panicked. No matter what situation we were in, he'd always would fix it. And that was another one he got fixed. And actually, he went back into town, got a new steering cable, and we went back fishing.
Wow.
Anyway, that's all I got. Those are my two stories.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks for calling. Great stories. Appreciate it.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's see. We're trying to get Rob to call in. He may be having a problem. The number's on the screen. So those are great stories. Well, I guess I'll kill some time. One time, Harold took me on a hike into the basin by Butte La Rose, and we were looking to see if anybody was illegally logging cypress from Section 16 lands. Okay, here's a call. Here we go. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello. This is Richard Hebert.
Richard Hebert, thanks for calling.
Sure. I don't hear myself on air.
That's okay. You go ahead and tell you're on the air. You can tell your story.
Okay, good. Okay, I met Harold when I was a member of the Sierra Club. I was a canoer, and I found out that he was leading trips, and I would go on trips into the basin with Harold. Harold Scheffler knew the Scheffler Basin like the back of his hand, and he was a very powerful paddler. And we would go everywhere in the basin, even camping overnight in a place where you would think there was no dry spot to be able to set up a tent. But that's my memories of Harold, a very strong canoer. And I liked him a lot because I learned a lot about the basin, and he knew everything about the basin.
Now, Richard, wasn't there an occasion where y'all caught some crabs in the river?
Oh, yes, in the Atchafalaya River, something that I didn't think existed. We caught some big blue point crabs in the river, and we camped out on the banks, on a bank in the river, and we had boiled crabs for supper. We set up our tents, and he made a fire, and we cooked those crabs. Very good.
I love that story. And I know Harold will too. So thank you. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you so much for calling in, Richard. Appreciate it.
Sure. Okay. Bye.
Okay, Rob, I know you're trying to call in, so here's your shot. So anyway, while we're waiting on Rob, oh Lord, he says he can't get through. Oh, keep trying, Rob. Oh, here we go. Hey, Rob, is that you?
That is me.
All right, here we go. Now we got Rob
I am
Andrews on. Let's hear your Harold story.
Oh, I'm going to start with this. In 2002, I was transferred to Lafayette, and I was involved in scouting in the Covington area where we lived. And we were transferred to Lafayette, and the kids got into Cathedral Carmel. So I figured at that point in time, the best thing to do would be to get them involved with the scout troop there. That way they have friends with like interests. And one of my friends who was involved in scouting with me in Covington said, hey, let me call and find out about the troop. So he calls Lafayette to a friend. He grew up in Lafayette, went to UL, calls one of his friends over there, and calls me back. And he says, Rob, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, well, what? He goes, it's about your troop that you're joining. And I'm like, what's wrong with it? He goes, the guy, the scoutmaster, whoo, he is like really hard-nosed. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by hard-nosed? He says his campouts are long, and they always go. It doesn't matter whether it's rain, snow, whatever, they go on that campout. It could be 100 degrees and they're going to camp. And I'm like, well, look, I told Bill at the time, I said, Bill, the kids are at Cathedral. I'm going to join. If we don't like it, we can always move troops. So that's the start of the story right there with Harold. And the first camp out, we're going on the first camp out, and the troop usually leaves for the camp out at noon. But I was also coaching a soccer team at the time, and I told Harold, I said, you know, can you push it back a little bit? And he goes, no, I can't. And I'm like, well, why not? He goes, well, because one, we've got to drive. We're driving up to Kisatchie. It's a backpacking trip, and we need to get up there because we're going to hike like 8 miles. And I'm like, oh, okay. You can't push it just back a little bit? He goes, no. I said, all right, well, my son really wants to go. I'll find you on the trail. I've been on that trail before. We'll just hook up with you sometime, you know, in the late afternoon sometime. So we get up there. It's late in the afternoon. We get up there and we hike into the camp. It's about, 7 o'clock. And we came in right at dark. And, of course, if you know anything about Troop 405, they always cook their meals on an open fire. So, you know, we cooked our meal. Everybody had a great time, sat around the campfire for a while, and then we went to bed. And if you've ever been sleeping in your tent, and you roll over and you open your eyes, it's usually dark. Well, it was like I could see everything in my tent when I rolled over. And I'm like, well, that's funny. I must have left my flashlight on. Well, in the distance, I hear a rumbling noise. And I'm like, uh-oh, it's fixing to rain. And I remember laying there in the tent with my son at 1 o'clock in the morning. This storm came through, and it must have rained 4 inches of water. It came down all night long. And about 7 o'clock that morning, I can hear people out and about. My son wakes up and he goes, oh, Dad, I'm gonna go check on him. I said, all right, I'll be up in a minute. So he gets out the tent and he goes out. About 5 minutes later, he comes back and he taps on the tent. He said, Dad. And I said, what? He goes, Mr. Scheffler has a fire going. And I'm like, a fire? What do you mean a fire? He goes, Dad, he's got a fire going. And I'm like, it rained like 4 inches. The man's got a fire going? He goes, oh, yeah, Dad, he's got a big fire going. And I'm like, oh, tell me he's not cooking breakfast. He goes, no, he's not cooking breakfast, but he's got a fire going. And I said, okay, well, I'm getting up. And he goes, oh, and by the way, Dad, I got to tell you something else. I said, what? He said, Mr. Scheffler does not like ponchos. And I'm like, why not? He says, because when you lean over a fire, the poncho swings out and it'll catch on fire and it'll melt to your body. So I said, okay, that's fair game. Just tell Mr. Scheffler you'll get a poncho. You'll have rain gear for the next camp out. He goes, okay. So he goes away, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm laying in the tent at that time, and I'm thinking, oh boy, am I in trouble? Because when I left the house, I had ponchos all rolled up, and I just stuck one in my backpack. And I get out of the tent, I walk over, and I throw my poncho out of my hand. So it goes, and it opens up. And I'm like, it wasn't just any poncho. Picture a yellow poncho with Mickey Mouse on the back of it. Not only that, but it was the child size. It wasn't the adult size. So when I put this thing on, it clung to my face like just my eyelids were pulled down. And I walked up to Harold, and I'll never forget this. I said, yeah, I know you don't like ponchos. And Harold looked at me, and I know at that moment you know how serious he can be. I know at that exact moment he turned around and he had to laugh, because it's like, oh my gosh, here's this guy in this little bitty poncho. So we're finishing up breakfast and everything, and we're all loaded up and we're ready to go, and Harold yells out a scout to take the lead, and he says, all right, troop, we're heading in that direction. And I said, hold on, Mr. Scheffler. And he goes, what? I said, I know this trail pretty good, and it rained awfully hard last night, and I know there's some big creeks up ahead, and we're going to have to cross those creeks. That water's going to be running through those creeks. Maybe we should go out the way we came in. And he looked right at me and he says, "We came in that way, we're going out this way." And I'm like, okay. So we take off, and the first creek crossing we come to, the water's going through the creek down there. And it's moving, but not extremely fast, but it was deep. And I'll never forget, I'm standing on the bank with Mike Lahaye, myself, and David Begno. And I look at him and I told him, I said, I tried to tell him, looks like we're turning around right now. And just about that time, Harold screams out, "What are you waiting for?" And down in the creek he goes. He wades across and up the other bank and turns around and looks at us. And Mike Lahaye looks at David and I and says, "Well, I guess we're getting our feet wet." So down in the creek the whole troop goes. We cross the first creek. We're walking along, and one of the scouts falls over. And he's like, "Oh," and it looks like he's in pain. And I'm like, "What's going on here, David?" And David goes, "Oh, he does this all the time." And I'm like, "What do you mean he does this all the time?" He goes, "Yeah, when we go backpacking, he always falls on the ground and he he's in pain." And just about that time, one of the scouts comes up to me and grabs my sleeve and says, "Mr. Rob?" And I looked and I said, "Yeah, Tyler, what do you want?" He goes, "Mr. Rob, it's just like the Passion of Christ." And I'm thinking to myself, the Passion of Christ? And I'm thinking, what in the heck does the Passion of Christ have to do with this scout on the ground and Troop 405? And Tyler goes, Mr. Rob, he's going to fall 3 times, and somebody's going to pick up his pack and carry it for him. And I'm like, what? I can't believe this is happening. He struggles. Harold's yelling at him, "Get up off the ground. We're going to leave you." And sure enough, we get him off the ground, and we walk a little bit further, and he falls the second time. And I'm like, I cannot believe this. We get him back up, and he falls that third time. And Harold is, "Get up now, or we are going to leave you." And I'm like, "David, surely he won't leave him out here, will he?" David goes, I don't know, he might." And I'm like, "No, there's no way he's going to leave this kid out here." And about that time he says, "All right, troop, pack up, we're leaving." And off they go. And I'm standing there with David, and I'm like, "David, we're just going to leave him here?" David said, "You heard Harold, we got to go." And I'm like, "But David, no." And I'm screaming at the kid, "Get up off the ground, we're leaving you." And we're about 50 yards from him down the trail. And I'm like, "No, David, we can't do this. We cannot do this. We have to go back and get the kid." So we go back, we pick him up, and guess who carries his pack at that time? Me. And David looks at me and goes, "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Rob. Harold doesn't like that." And I'm like, we can't leave him here." So we're walking along, and we walk around the next curve, and there's the whole troop standing there, and Harold looking at us with his arms folded. And I remember walking around that curve going, "Uh-oh," and just dropping the backpack at my feet and saying, I'm not carrying it. I wasn't carrying it. So we get him going again, and David at that time had gone to Kilimanjaro, to hike Kilimanjaro. So he had this like high altitude goose stuff that you would suck on that gives you instant energy. And David tells Harold, he goes, "Hey, I've got some of this stuff. You want me to hit him with it, and or give it to him?" And Harold says, "Yeah, give it to him." So he gives him this, and of course he gets up, and we start walking. And we go about another mile, and of course he's back on the ground, and we're trying to get him up. And Harold goes, "David, you got any more of that stuff?" And David's like, "Well, but Harold, you're not really supposed to give him that much." And Harold says, "I don't care. Give him another one." David gives him a second one, and we keep going down the trail, and he falls again. And finally he's frustrated, and Harold says, "David, give him another one." And David's like, "I can't. We're gonna overdose this kid." So he gave him part of one. And eventually, we got him back to the van. But it was like, oh my gosh, is every camping trip going to go like this? But I think that day at the end of it, it was like it must have been about 13 or 14 miles that we had done that day with the troop. And
Wow.
like my friend said, it was like, oh my gosh, these guys, you know, they're all in pretty good shape. But I will say this about Harold, that the lessons that these guys learned in scouting carried them throughout their lives. You know, most people are lucky to have one or two mentors like Mr. Scheffler in their lives that you know, teach them just basic skills. And I'm thinking of one scout in mind. This guy came into the troop, and
Excuse me, Rob.
you know, y'all.
Rob, can you?
Yeah.
We got a lot of people calling in, so
Okay,
can you?
All right,
We may be able to
I'll
get
end
you
it.
back on later.
that'll be fine. I'll hang up and let them call. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Great story. Appreciate it. So here we go. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, Roger.
Yes.
Jody Mesh, man, I wanted to call in and say a few words about Mr. Harold and just, I haven't been able to go by and visit him because I've been working on a turnaround, working 7 days a week, 7/12, trying to make up and not making a good crawfish season, but I didn't want to miss calling in for him because I love it to death. I love him like an old uncle, and I'm really looking forward to him getting better so he can get out on the water and go fishing and go duck hunting and, you know, get out in the basin and do the things he loves to do. But quick couple of little stories. You know, when I first met Harold years ago, Harold, you know, he's been like a savior for us in the Chapala Basin because, I mean, as you know and a lot of people know, there are the powers that be that wanted to try to run the wild commercial crawfishermen out of the Chapala Basin. And Harold knows the laws, and he knows we have a right to use those waters to make a living. But he came and met with me and Mike Avenue with a bunch of maps under his arm when we first started having this trouble with the basin issues 30 years ago. And said, you tell them water bottom claimants to go to hell. He said, you got a right to be out there. And we didn't think we had the right, but he educated us about the laws. I mean, I know the law better than a lot of people now because of Mr. Harold Scheffler, and he's been an unbelievable, educator, you know, about the laws and educator about our rights in the Chapala Basin. And he really taught us how to fight and fight for our way of our life and fight for what we're about. It chokes me up talking about him because I look at him like an old uncle, you know, and I'd do anything for him, and I just hope he pulls through from this stroke, and I hope we can have him around for a lot of years to come. But quick couple of stories. Harold came out. We had a surveyor, and Gordon was with us. I think Gordon had just got out of law school, and we were going to do some surveying in the Buffalo Cove area in Ball. That surveyor had to cut a little area to be able to do. It was like a benchmark they had to set, and he had to kind of cut an area in through the brush. You know what I'm saying? So he could set his benchmark or whatever. So, man, we had a chainsaw, and Harold had brought his chainsaw. I think he had a brand new chainsaw, Harold. So let me get the chainsaw, boy, and he cranked up that chainsaw. He started cutting with that chainsaw, and you couldn't stop him from cutting. He was like the Energizer Bunny with a chainsaw in his head, you know. And that surveyor said, yeah, he said, well, that's enough now. He said, that's good. And Garvin said, Dad, you can stop now, Dad. You can stop. I said, Mr. Harold, I said, you got enough. But look, he got a hold of that chainsaw, and he was like a kid with a brand new toy, you know what I'm saying? But we finally got him to stop cutting all of the brush, and the surveyor was able to probably take one of the best benchmarks he ever set in his life. But anyway, he called me one day a few years back, and my youngest boy was a teenager. I'll tell you another quick story about him, but I love him to death, you know. But he said, hey, Jody, you want to come make a duck hunt with me and wherever they hunt, or, you know, it's kind of like toward Pecan Island over there, but on the duck lease. And I said, yeah, Mr. Harold. I said, can my boy come, Bryce? He said, yeah, bring Bryce. He said, I got a blind and we can put it in. So, boy, we get in his boat before daylight, boy, and we go down the old intercoastal to where their duck lease is, and we get over there, and he told Bryce, he said, boy, he said, get in that pirogue right there, and he said, paddle out, there's a blind straight out that way. He said, paddle out to that blind. He said, you can go hunting that blind. And he said, your dad's going to come with me. So I got in the boat. I think we got in the boat. I think we had a boat, he and I don't remember if we paddled or we had a boat. He might have paddled, I don't remember. But anyway, my youngest boy, Bryce, went off to that blind, and Harold and I went to his blind, and there was a lot of teal. Harold said Bryce is going to shoot a lot of teal. He's going to get his limit pretty quick. So Bryce shot, and he got his limit, and he called. He said, Daddy, he said, I got 6. I said, you got 6? I said, don't shoot no more. Harold said, oh, yeah, tell him don't shoot no more. So Bryce killed his limit pretty quick. But Harold and I were in the blind, and I had brought some kind of weak shells. I'm not going to make any excuses. But anyway, we had shot a few ducks. I called them in. We were calling and everything. There was a big greenhead, and he was coming on my side of the blind. And like the rule of the blind is if the duck's on your side of the blind, you shoot the duck. You know what I mean? So big greenhead, we gave him a call, man. He was coming in perfect, like just passing by off to my right. A good shot, So, boy, I take my time, man, and I'm a good shot, Roger. I've been hunting ducks since I'm a kid with my old man. I mean, I felt like that was a easy picking, So, man, I shot that first shot, boy, pow, I didn't draw a feather. Boy, I took my time, I shot that second shot, pow, I didn't draw a feather. And that third shot, he was done passing the blind and then getting away, and Harold had a little 20 gauge in his hand. I shot that third shot, didn't draw a feather. Look, I ducked down in the bottom of the blind. I said, get him, Mr. Harold. Mr. Harold got up with that 20 gauge and folded that son of a gun. One shot, he folded him dead. And you could tell he was so proud. I said, God dog, Mr. Harold. I said, you sure make me look bad on that one. You know what I'm saying? You could tell he got a kick out of that. But we had 3 ducks that were high. And I said, go. I gave him a call, and then I said, that's some pintail, Mr. Harold. And all of the older hunters love to kill pintail because they're very wary ducks. When I told him some pintail, he hadn't really seen them because they were straight kind of over our head. And them son of a gun, look, when I gave them a call, they broke and dove down on us. It's like all their girlfriends was in that hole the way they came down, like they were coming to meet their girlfriends. I mean, I raised my gun because pintail, you don't play with them. Right away, it's like they were almost on the end of the gun barrel. I shot. I got 2 of them. He got up. He shot. We knocked 1 or 2 or whatever. But we made an unbelievable, beautiful hunt. We killed our limit. He and I, my boy, killed his limit. And he said, Jody, we're going to go to the camp. He said, we're going to bait my catfish line. So we go to the camp, and we start gutting the ducks and getting the gizzards and the livers and stuff and the hearts. And we caught it. He had a bunch of bush lines for catfish in the hole in the coastal. So we used them duck gizzards and every old swamper. You know what I'm saying? We baited up his bush line and caught a mess of catfish. And we had a big old beautiful mess of ducks. Man, went back to Lafayette with that boy. You could tell he was as proud as you could get. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting better so we can spend some more good time together. But tell him I love him when you see him. And
Jody,
I've been real busy, but as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to get over there to see him.
Jody, I know he's listening, and I know he appreciates everything you said. Those are wonderful stories, and I'm so glad you called in and got to tell your stories, and I know he appreciates us too. Thank you so much.
Mr. Harold is one heck of I call him a humanitarian. He's a person who just genuinely wants to help people and leave a good mark on the world that he lives in. And I tell you what, we really appreciate him, and we want him to get well soon.
Okay, Jody, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. So we can add to Harold related to Batman, MacGyver, and now Lumberjack. You heard that? Lumberjack. Okay, so lines are open. I can finish telling when we were hiking out in Butte La Rose, he had this little GPS about the size of those old cell phones, those old Nokia cell phones, long time ago, and this is like 10 years ago. Okay, so Harold, you know how old he is. So 10 years ago, is 10 years younger. So he's looking at the GPS, trying to get his bearings, and little letters and numbers on the GPS were tiny. I could barely see them with my reading glasses. And so, okay, here we go. I think we got Rob again. So, Rob, that you?
It is.
You got another quick story?
Oh, I've got two actually, but I'll go with this one. It deals with scouting again, but I did have your previous caller, Jody. I do have a story that involves a scout troop with Jody also on one night in the middle of the basin. But we'll go with this other. It was like our second camp out with the troop when we had moved to Lafayette, and it was a canoe trip. And you know, I had no clue. I'd never been in the Chapalaya Basin before, and my wife was like, "Well, where are y'all going?" I said, "Well, we're going in the basin." She goes, "Well, where in the basin?" I said, "Julie, I have no clue. It's just," he said, "we're going in the basin." She goes, "Well, where are you leaving from?" I said, "I have no clue." He said something about the Jeanneret Canal, I think. And so we get the whole scout troop down there, and we're in the Jeanneret Canal. We leave, and the dads canoed with dads, and the scouts canoed with scouts. That was Mr. Scheffler's rule. And Mr. Scheffler had this other dad in the canoe with him, and off they went. And I was paddling with Steve Oob at the time, and I would tell Steve, I said, "Man, does he always paddle that fast?" And Steve goes, "Oh yeah, all the time." I'm like, I can't even, I don't even know where he went to. It's a straight canal, so he's got to be somewhere up here. Sure enough, we get up there, and there's Harold and the other dad in the canoe waiting for us. Scout, he says, "All right, we're going to head across Lake Foss Point here." So we start paddling, and off they go again. I said, "Steve, you got to watch where he goes, because I have no clue where we are." And Steve, on the horizon, you could see like a glimmer of a paddle. And Steve looks at me, and I go, "Man, do they paddle fast?" He goes, "Yep. Old Johnson, we're going to call him Johnson and Evinrude, in that canoe." And they were gone. And then finally we catch back up to him again, and we get down into below Lake Foss Point there, and he's waiting there, and he now says, "All right, we're going to take the canoes out, and we've got to haul all our gear and canoes over the levee and put them in the basin." And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." So we struggle. We get all our canoes up there. The scouts get all their canoes up there, and we start paddling again. And there goes Johnson and Evinrude. Off they go. And we are paddling, and we are paddling, and we are paddling, and we are paddling. And one of the scouts, I remember, looked at me and said, "Mr. Rob, we're lost, aren't we?" And I'm like, no. Mr. Scheffler has to be around here somewhere. Now I have no clue where we are. We're in the basin somewhere. And then in the distance, he said something about camping on Oscar Island. I remember this. And in the distance, maybe a mile off, I'm looking and I see smoke coming from this, what looks to be like an island. And I said, "That's where he is. That's the campfire. I bet he's already got a campfire going." Well, we pull up, park the canoes, the guys get out, cook dinner, and they're in bed. We've now paddled it must have been 36 miles or so, and they're in the bed sleeping. So it's really just the adults sitting around the campfire. And I'm trying to put all the dads with their sons, right? But I don't know who this dad is in the canoe with Mr. Scheffler. But I knew his name, and his name was Peter. And I said, "So, Peter, which son is yours in the troop?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't have a son in the troop." And I'm like, "You don't? So you just like to come out and paddle, 35 miles? And he goes, "Oh, no, I'm a rider." And I'm like, "Oh, well," I put my foot in my mouth. I said, "A rider. So you're writing an article for the Chapelizod Basin for the newspaper? And he looks right at me and he says, no, I write for National Geographic, Outside Magazine, Adventure Magazine. And I'm like, oh. And I said, so you're doing an article on the basin? And he goes, no, I'm doing an article on your Scoutmaster. And I looked at him and I pointed to Harold and I said, Harold? He goes, yeah, Harold. I said, that Harold? And he goes, yes, that Harold. And I'm thinking, what possibly could you be? He goes, don't you know who he is? And I'm like, yeah, he's Mr. Scheffler. He like owns a Cadillac dealership. What else should I know about him? And he says, oh, Mr. Scheffler is the foremost water quality expert, one of the foremost water quality experts in the United States. And I'm like, that Harold? And he goes, yeah, that Harold. And I'm like, and he goes, yeah, I'm doing an article on the basin with Harold and water quality, and it'll be in Outside Magazine in August. And I'm like, that Harold? And he goes, yeah, that Harold.
That article is a classic. That's how I got to know Harold. And as you may know, Peter Heller called in last month's show and gave a great story. So.
Yep. So that next morning we get up. And I'm looking at Harold, and he's got the scout troop standing there. We're all in our life jackets. The canoes are loaded. We're ready to go. And I said, okay, Harold, before you leave, you have to tell me, give me directions to the landing. I have to know these directions. And I know these directions by heart and can still tell you to this day. He looks at us, and he says, you see the river there? And we're like, everybody goes, yep. He goes, we're going to cross the river. Now, the current's going downstream, so aim those canoes up. And when you get to that bank over there, we're then going to paddle upstream. And I'm like, what? Hold on, Harold. You mean to tell me we could have camped way back there instead of having to paddle upstream? And he turns around and he looks at me and he says, Rob, he says, anybody can paddle downstream. They need to learn how to paddle upstream. My jaw hit the ground. And I'm like, okay. So what do we do? He goes, well, you're going to paddle up that bank, and when you'll come to a series of camps tied up, okay? Then you're going to come to 3 cypress trees. When you come to those 3 cypress trees, it's going to open up into like a lake. Take the 3rd portage, paddle down that portage until you find one creosote post sticking out of the ground. When you see that creosote post, take a left, and it'll get you to the landing. And I'm like, okay, I got it. So immediately, Johnson and Evinrude get in that canoe, and they're gone. And I told Steve Oob, I said, Steve, he jumped in and said, you got to go. I'm going to stay with the kids back here. We swapped out one of the best kid paddlers and put him in there with Steve, and off they went. So here comes the rest of the group up. We pass the camps. We pass those 3 cypress trees. And we get to that lake, and Steve Oob, I'll never forget this, is in the canoe paddling circles. And I'm like, Steve, tell me you got here, and tell me you saw which way he went. He goes, no, Rob, I didn't. And I'm like, oh. So I'm looking, and I go, 1, 2, 3. That's got to be the canal. And Steve goes, no, I think it's over here. And I'm like, okay, you're from Lafayette. I'm going to go with you. I've never been in the basin, but I think that's where we need to go, but we'll go this way. So we paddle, and we're paddling for about another 20 minutes, and all of a sudden out of a canal behind us comes a boat, vroom, and it flies by us. And I told Steve, I said, that boat is going to the landing. We need to follow that boat. So we turned the whole group around, and we started following the bubbles of the motor, what the motor left. And we're paddling, and one of the scouts goes, hey, Mr. Rob. I said, yeah, what? What, Parker? He goes, we're lost, aren't we? I said, Parker, look around, count the canoes. How many do you see? And he counted 9. I said, that's right, Parker. Who's missing? He goes, Mr. Scheffler. I said, that's exactly right, Parker. We know exactly where we are. It's Mr. Scheffler who's missing. And, of course, eventually we came up on that one creosote post, turned, and we started paddling, and we pull up to the landing, and there's Peter Heller. I'll never forget this. Peter Heller standing there with Harold and like 3 game wardens, and they going, "Yep, we're going to give y'all another 20 minutes, and we're going to come out looking for you." I'm just like, I cannot believe this. I just cannot believe it, you know. But
Well,
yeah, those were I've always said he's given me some of the greatest stories to tell along the way, you know. Do you have another caller, or would?
no, nobody's trying to call in. If you folks out there, if you want to call in, I can cut Rob off. But so far, nobody's calling in. So go ahead.
Okay.
We got
right.
10 and a half minutes. So maybe you got a short one? Oh, whatever.
I got it. I've got a fairly short one. Every summer, the troop would go to summer camp, and if you went to summer camp, you qualified to go on what Mr. Scheffler called the Out West trip. And the Out West trip, you left Lafayette. It was like 9 days, and you traveled about 4,200 miles. You went all the way up to Montana, back down through Yellowstone and everything. And on this particular trip, we were up on the border of Montana and Wyoming, and I'm riding in the car with Ken Champagne, and we're up in Beartooth Pass, and the snow's stacked up all over the place, and we're driving along, and all of a sudden, Harold, puts on his brakes and pulls over on the other side of the road and stops, and I'm like, Ken, what's he doing? And Ken's like, I don't know, Rob. So, of course, the other cars that were following had to pull down the road, and we pull off on the right-hand side of the road. And Ken and I get out, and we're standing there looking at him. And he's got all the kids that were in his vehicle are out digging in the snow. And I'm like, what are they doing? And Ken goes, I don't know. And all of a sudden, Harold pulls out the ice chest. And they're dumping snow into this ice chest. And it's not just any snow. It's kind of the dirty snow because it's right alongside of the road. And he yells back at Ken, Ken, get your ice chest right now up here so we can fill it with ice. And Ken looks at him and screams, no, Harold, I'm not filling up my ice chest with that dirty snow. I'll buy my ice somewhere. But it was all along the trip. There were things, you'd run into instances where, the kids would do something and it was just, if there was ever a time in a camp out, they never remembered the easy camp outs, right? It was always one of those camp outs that they had to overcome a challenge with. And it seemed like Mr. Scheffler was always the one that, put him in a situation where, okay, you're going to have to figure this out. And it always seemed like the kids, no matter what they did, were able to figure out, this or that. And like I was saying, one of the little scouts that I was talking about earlier, and if you have just a few minutes, I'll tell this story. We were on the Out West trip, and we had left Spearfish, South Dakota, and we were heading up to Beartooth Pass, Montana. So we were kind of cutting the corner of Wyoming. We were leaving South Dakota, cutting the corner of Wyoming, and then moving into Montana. And if you've ever been up there, there are no trees or anything anywhere. And Mr. Scheffler's philosophy was, when we stop, everybody goes to the bathroom, no matter what. And we had stopped in Spearfish at a McDonald's to eat lunch, and everybody had to go to the restroom, and we load up in the car. Well, we're driving, and it's probably about an hour later or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, and one of the scouts goes, Mr. Rob, I have to go to the bathroom. And I turned around and looked at him and said, did you not go at the McDonald's? And he goes, Mr. Rob, I did. And then it kind of hit me. I asked him, do you have to go number 1 or do you have to go number 2? And he says, I have to go number 2. And I'm like, oh boy, Mr. Scheffler's not going to like this, but I've got to call him on the radio. So I pick up the radio and I go, and you hear, yeah, Rob, what you want? I said, I have a scout back here who's got to go to the bathroom. And I moved the radio away from my ear, and he comes back. Didn't he go and spearfish? And I radio back to him, and I said, yes, Roger, Mr. Scheffler. He went and spearfished, but he doesn't have to go number one. He's got to go number two. And I pull the radio away from my ear again, and he blasts on there. Does he know there's not a tree for 200 miles? And I said, yes, Mr. Scheffler, we've already had that discussion. He doesn't really care. And Harold immediately radios back. He goes, all right, I'm going to speed up here. I'll look for something, and when I find it, I'll radio back to you. I said, that'll be great. So about 5 minutes goes by, and the radio cracks again. Rob? Yeah, Harold, you find something? Harold goes, yeah, Rob, there's a creosote post up here. I said, a what? He goes, one creosote post. That's it. That's the only thing out here. And I said, I turned and asked him, I said, do you care if it's a creosote post? He goes, I don't care, Mr. Rob. So we come along, and it's, a rather large single post. There's nothing but this one creosote post, and we pull up to this creosote post. The scouts throw the doors open. This guy jumps out of the van at the time, and I don't think he made it to the creosote post. And as he's down in the ditch, a big 18-wheeler comes behind us and blows his horn. I'm screaming to him, get behind the door in the creosote post. No. But that scout learned so many life lessons with Harold, and to this day, he is in the United States Army. He's a sergeant, and he has his jump wings. He's really done well in the Army, and I can tell you he did. That's because of Harold Scheffler.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Okay, we got about 3 minutes plus left. Thank you so much, Rob, for the great stories.
All right.
So
get well, Mr. Scheffler. Get well.
Right. So we got 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I want to remind everybody that this show will be on my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is called Logic with Harold Scheffler, and it will have this show in the very near future and the last month's show on there, as well as 2 or 3 years back Ecologics. One more call. Okay, here we go. Hello.
Hey, this is Harold Scheffler calling in.
Yeah, no, this is not Harold.
Huh? No, it's not Harold. It's Sarah. But
Oh,
you want
okay.
to talk to Harold?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Harold. Harold, those are some great stories, huh? Jody called in, and Rob.
Talk there, babe. Don't look at that. Talk.
Okay, Roger.
Yeah, Harold, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to tell the story of Joan Williams and the opportunity we had for taking a canoe trip with the Sierra Club. Joan led a canoe trip. I mean, she was always talking about how the White River, White Arkansas, so, I said, well, I have a little canoe trip we'll take from Pecan Island, and we'll go to Chinarity. Only the waves were up around 6 feet high.
Wow.
That means it's 12 feet from the top to the bottom.
Wow.
And you're in a 17-foot canoe, and the big issue is how do you get to the bank? And, Joan had her 3 kids, her 3 kids, and
So we pulled up to the beach, and I knew how to do that because we did that when we were kids. We had a canoe when nobody else had one. And so I knew very well what to do. And so when the first breaker lifts your canoe, which was a mile out, just paddle hard, and you'll make a surfboard out of it, and you will end up on the beach.
Wow.
And anyway,
Like the outriggers in Hawaii.
right, yeah. So anyway, we had, I guess,
13 canoes.
13 canoes, and
Harold, I hate to tell you, it's going to cut off in about 15 seconds.
okay. So anyway, we ended up with a very successful trip, and we paddled back, and it was beyond,
That's it, Harold.
beyond belief. Yeah. Okay.
And she's screaming,
Talk to you soon.
"Never again, Harold. You're a crazy man."
Oh, the show cut off, but we can still talk. So, we had some good calls, huh?
Yeah.
We got
Yes, we did.
we got Rob kind of he got the lion's share of the stories, but I was so glad to hear from Jody. He had some good stories, and then we were waiting for Rob to call in, and Jacob told he told a great story about Harold. So all right, I hope y'all enjoyed it.
Doing that.
Yeah, thank you,
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. So let me sign off. I'll see you later. Hey. Well, yeah, that's a little confusing. So I'm sorry that happened, but it worked out okay. Yeah, and the only thing is, Harold was telling the story. I had to cut him off because we ran out of time. So anyway, thanks again. So thanks again. I appreciate you. Well, probably not. Probably not. Next month is will be around Christmas, and I haven't even thought about it. To tell you the truth, but fourth. I'll leave it up to Harold, but right now I'm like I told you before. If he gets in shape where he can come down here, what I want to do is